Hello, everybody, and welcome to Marvin Gardens, June 2023. We are just 6 hours or so into summer. The summer solstice was at 10:57 a.m. and it does not feel like summer out here. It's cool and breezy and cloudy, and I could have even put a small jacket on, but I refused to because you shouldn't be wearing a jacket on the first day of summer. Alright, so lots of stuff going on, as it always is in June. So I'm going to turn us around here and see if I can manage to get us underway here. And we'll start here in what has become the pond iris garden or patch or whatever. You might see it looks a little vacant there. I've pulled out some of the purple pond irises, which are all done blooming, because I was afraid they were just going to be overrun by the yellow pond irises. But here's our Asian leeks slash garlic chives, doing pretty fine, and if not a little weedy. And there's my boy Frankie, and he's checking things out, thinking that we must be looking at something interesting. And as you recall, Coco's got a fresh coating of colorful paints, and we got some more Asian leeks down there, and even a couple of cinnamon basils. So that's all looking good. The greenhouse looks pretty much the same as it did before. Still haven't been in there to kind of like clean it up, but there's nothing going on there as far as planting goes. And on the back of the mini barn, we've got all the planters planted. This year we're just doing marigolds, and then that's where the purple pond irises ended up. Don't know where I'm going to put them. And I've also got some hens and chicks that I'm not sure where they're going to go either. But at least things are looking nice around here. That brings us to bed number one, and we have the same absence that we did last month, in that I don't see any of the two varieties of carrots coming up yet, but I just recently replanted them. There's one right at the end there that came up and is growing okay, but that's literally the only one. Then we got this healthy stand of daikon radishes, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you anything, but down here you might be able to see some bulbing radishes. They're not quite up to size yet. I did not thin them out at all, but I think they'll just push each other out of the way and still grow to a pretty good size, so I'm not too worried about that. Then we've got a couple of rows of the Salanova lettuce. We've harvested at least 8 heads. The rest of them are starting to threaten to bolt, so we're going to have to harvest and eat a bunch of those pretty soon. Next, a double row of red cabbage, which is just looking lovely. Hasn't really started to head up yet, except for maybe that one right there. And Skywalker cauliflower, and I don't, I haven't really looked. Yeah, there is a head forming down there. Let me see. Why am I not? There we go. And if I move enough out of the way, you'll be able to see down there a whitehead. and none of them are big enough to be harvested. I'll probably come in here and break off the leaves or snap them over to protect the white heads from the sun. But then we got a double row here of storage number 4 cabbage, which, as you know, is my favorite. And we have a little red kale growing here, just because we had some vacancies, as you may recall from last time. And we have the harvested early snow cauliflower, and we also have harvested broccoli. So the broccoli has all been pulled, and now we're just waiting for side shoots. That's why we lift them here. And you can see a few coming in there. I also think I have some stills of the broccoli, which I'm sure I'm showing you. That's another kale, a green kale plant. You recall from last time that I just planted, to cover from vacancies. And these lovely rows are cutting celery, and they're looking pretty good. The only problem is that when we cut them and tried to use them in a salad, they kind of taste bitter, both the leaves and the stalks. So I'm not sure if they'll be less bitter as they mature, or we need to blanch them before we use them, or what. But we'll try a few things because they grow very nicely, and it's nice to be able to harvest them as they come in. This row is cantaloupe, and they're already starting to bloom quite a bit, just beginning to crawl up the trellis a little bit. So we'll keep fertilizing them, and hopefully they'll give us some nice juicy cantaloupe. All right, so back to the herb garden proper. Got a little cinnamon basil right there. Right next to it is some garlic chives or Asian leeks, some more cinnamon basil, a little bit of chives, a nice stand of darky celery, which with a darky dachshund walking right by. And we've harvested a bunch of that. And then we got a pretty good stand of sage planted from seed, and I just removed the old one that wintered over but then immediately died thereafter. Now we got 2 varieties of rosemary here, and that begins our of course our parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, which is this huge mound over there, even though there are some unwanted weeds and grass popping up. But this is the creeping thyme, which is wintered over and done so well. And then down here is, although it's hard to tell with all the weeds, winter thyme, but it's also doing pretty well. Now, I did manage to come over here and clean up the pet memorial area a little bit, so that looks at least a little more tamed than it has been in a while. And Frankie's taking a look at the sleeping dachshund, as well as whatever else is back there. Now, what else? You remember last time we had the baby bunnies? They have all dispersed. Vanina just saw one in the garden a little while ago. We've got one living close to the house that Frankie found and thought was pretty interesting to try and dig into the where the oil tank is, but no luck on that. So that is my Dill's Atlantic Giant Pumpkin, and you're saying, boy, that doesn't look very big. And why do you have only one plant in there? Well, it's supposed to get huge. At least now it's starting to vine. So we got a little bit of hope, but it's certainly not as big as I thought it was going to be. Then we got a volunteer borage here, and a bunch more that I planted in a pot. And peeking way back inside there is a cinnamon basil, and this is a volunteer sunflower that came up. I'm not sure what the variety is. And this is our cilantro. I still haven't tasted it enough to decide if I love it or hate it, so we'll see on that. Jury's still out. And cumin. I don't think I've grown that before. Looks like it's starting to bud or flower. And speaking of flowers, we got a couple of rows of mixes of calendula. And we've got a couple of rows of scallions in differing states of maturity. And then we got all our onions, which you remember we replanted from onion sets, and luckily they are doing quite well. So we're not worried about that anymore. But these the sets that I got, the only ones that were available, didn't even have a variety name. It's like white, yellow, and red. So who knows what we're going to get. Anyway, that brings us on to bed number 3. These are all sunflowers on this end, also in various states of maturity. And I believe we got straw flowers next to that, a couple of rows. And what's down here are volunteer ground cherries. And because whatever flower that I planted there did not work, and although those are overrun a little bit, those ground cherries should eventually take off. I may need to feed them a little bit to give them some encouragement. And then this is also, I think, a variety that didn't come up, and so instead I planted what looks like calendula that came up voluntarily, and so I just made it a row of whatever they are. We'll find out. Now we're on to summer squash. Everything's looking a lot better than it did last month, but we haven't gotten anything that's harvestable yet. And if you recall, we've got some, I think we had one scallop squash that survived, and the rest are store-bought yellow squash of some variety. Same thing here, although this big plant right here is a crookneck squash, and one of the originals that did survive. And then we've got zucchini, but none of the ones that have come up have shown any promise that they're actually got pollinated and are going to survive. So the jury's still out on which one of these plants will stay and produce and which ones won't. Then we also have another row of volunteer, what I think are calendula, that might be crowded out by the summer squash, but they're volunteers. So what do you think? Here's our corn. We're growing the same sugar buns variety that we did last year, but they're way behind they were last year by design, because I planted them all late. So the general rule is knee-high by the 4th of July. Well, it's nowhere near the 4th of July, and it's already waist high, so either way I'm not worried. But the interesting thing is, I don't know if you can see the difference between this half and this half is that this half, they're much paler green and much smaller than the ones on that end, and I have no idea why, because we did not do staggered planting like we did last year. So maybe this end just needs some extra food or something. I don't know, who knows. But even the anemic end looks not too bad. Now, that brings us to bed number 5. These are all eggplant on this row, and as you can see by all the holes in these leaves, they have been hit by flea beetles. I have also treated them for flea beetles, so hopefully that'll help. And then these next 4 rows are all peppers, and if you look real closely, looks like, if I can run the camera right, that is a pepper, and I don't know if you can see in there, but there's another pointy pepper right in there towards the center. So they're starting to come in, nothing close to harvestable. But this is tomatoes, as you can see, since last month. I did put up all the tomato cages, and I'm not going to try to name the varieties, but as you can see, they're like halfway or more to the top of the tomato cages. And I just looked at last year's June video, and they're doing much better. They're blooming like crazy, and those nice little yellow blooms that you see everywhere. And but I don't see any tomatoes, but I'm sure I will within a few days. So that's not too bad. Here's the backside of the Dill's Atlantic Giant pumpkin plant, and as you can see, it is vining, but the leaves are just much smaller than I thought they would be. So who knows what's going on with that. Meanwhile, we got some, I think those are actual pond plants that made it over here, and bee balm, and Mr. Franklin following around as always, and of course the Sky Manor Marsh, or swamp, or what have you. Now, I do want to show you something over here in the asparagus patch, because this is open and closed, and because my neighbor told me every morning, I don't know if I mentioned this before, every morning he saw deer in the asparagus patch, not in the garden proper, but here in the asparagus patch. So you may notice these little black things here in the on the corners, and what those are deer deterrents. Whoop! I just got deterred. I'll try to show you with this one. Let's see. I'll just put my hand in front of this one, and there you see it sprays what should scare off a deer. Just a few. Whoop! You know what? Sometimes I think I'm an idiot. Other times I'm sure of it. Anyway, that's really all to show you in the asparagus patch, because if I try to show you anything else, I'm going to get sprayed some more. So hopefully the camera didn't get too wet. All right, I'm coming back in, and going to latch everything up. And of course, Mr. Franklin is with us. So Not much else to show you in the garden proper. These fence boxes, I don't know if I mentioned last time, I'm getting rid of all of them. They're just too hard to keep watered for the whole season, so I'm going to get rid of them, burn them in the fire pit, and save the soil for something else. All right, so now we are at the fire pit. Fire pit looks pretty nice, and we also, I think this the first Cassie sighting. There she is, and she's not real thrilled being out here today, but she is. You can see she's prancing, so she knows she's in the garden. She knows she's having a pretty good time, especially when she knows kind of where I am. So, good girl, Cassie. Frankie's doing the happy roll, so you know he's having a good time in the garden. And generally, it's hard not to have a good time in the garden in June. What else we got? This is Anise hyssop that is not even close to blooming. I showed you the robin's nest before. I don't even want to, take a chance on disturbing that. Got a few flowers planted down here, and bee balm in that pot, bee balm in this pot, which, by the way, I'm just noticing is blooming. And this is a pot full of borage, all of which were volunteers, and I just pulled them out and transplanted them over here, and they're doing great. So hopefully we'll do some of those in a salad in the future. Brings us to the water features. Not really much to look at because these pond irises, which were purple/blue, have done, and they're actually creating seed pods, so that's good. And this one, you can see the purple pond irises are still blooming, some of which are long past, but pretty healthy bloom out of those guys. And now that I look at it, the water's not flowing very well in there, so we'll have to look at that. And this is our honeysuckle vine that we've allowed to just grow around this this fence area here. And we got I planted impatiens here because it's kind of shady over here. I thought they'd do well, and they're just surrounding the peppermint mint plant, which you can see is doing quite nicely. So let's move to the backyard for a minute. Trying to move things along here, but I never have very much luck with that. Now, here's the pond, and I don't know how well you can see, but you can see Mr. Old Yeller, I think we call him, the koi, the one remaining koi. You can see that I've put in a new water lily plant, and I think you can see that you can see Marvin down to the rocks that are inside the pond. So this is kind of the clearest we've gotten the pond water so far, although you can't see it with the reflection there. And this is the completely rebuilt waterfall, and I'm still working on, sealing up the flow so that nothing gets down behind the liner, which after all that work I was still getting. But I've also fortified the rocks along the edges here, so we've got nice big rocks to stand on. I got a a new pond plant right there. I don't even know what it is. And that's my perennial dianthus. And other than that, not much to show you. We have planted a few annuals around the wishing well. The tiger lilies are in peak full bloom. We do have some asparagus that has survived off the back deck here, and no sign of asparagus beetles yet. And so I believe that means we're going to take a look at the fruit trees. And since I see several, we'll start right here. And you can see a number of pairs. It's not a tremendous number of pairs, but it's a healthy number of pairs if they hang on and make it. So that's good. And kind of similarly, we've got nectarines still hanging in there. It's still early. We had a lot of the little ones drop off. But these, since they're sort of walnut size, at least show promise of continuing. But we'll see. If they do, it'll be the first time we've ever had any. And we also have not as many, but a few peaches hanging around here. Oh boy, there's less than there was last time by quite a few. But if you look up this branch, there's 1, 2, 3. So at least there's a few. So, golly heck almighty, what, let's see, 3. So, that, I think that's going to do it. I'm just chuckling because Cassie is still prancing around. And, and that's a good sign. It's always nice to see a 17-year-old dog having a good time and showing a fair amount of energy. So anyway, golly, can't think of anything I didn't show you. We're going to have a trail cam following this. And you'll know by now whether or not we had some drone footage. I never know if I'm going to feel inspired to do that or not. Interestingly enough, you might have noticed that the umbrellas are all down. That's because although it's been dry for the last 2 weeks or so for the most part, we're supposed to get up to 7 days in a row of rain and showers amounting to 2 to 3 inches of rain in the next 7 days. So, and it feels like that's what's coming in now. So it's okay. That's much needed, even though we don't typically need it in the garden because we've got a watering system here. But so Marvin Gardens, June 2023. Summer has started officially, and we hope you guys are having a great summer so far, and even meteorological summer, which began on June 1st. So that's going to do it, and we will see you next time, and hopefully Cassie will be having just as much fun as she is now, just sort of walking around and prancing happily, and the boy exploring whatever might be in there. Who knows? Sometimes there's snakes in there, boy. But that's going to do it, And until next time, which will be July and the high holy days of gardening, although things are looking pretty darn good around here right now. So, again, hope you guys are having a great summer. We'll see you next month in July. Bye, y'all.
Terrible world, yeah.